Princess Liara paced back and forth in the royal nursery. Her bright blue eyes were tired from hours of trying to soothe her baby, but nothing worked. The infant, wrapped in soft alien cloth, cried loudly, his little fists clenched in distress. The sound echoed through the grand halls of the palace. No matter what Liara tried, her baby wouldn't stop crying. She had tried every method known to her people. The palace healers had used their advanced alien technology to check the baby's health, but nothing was wrong. The royal advisors, who had seen countless babies born in the palace, were just as puzzled. They had suggested everything special: herbs, new lullabies, even using the soft hum of the palace's energy systems to calm the child. But none of it worked. The baby's cries continued, filling the princess's heart with worry. Liara's thoughts raced as she looked at her son, her heart breaking. She had hoped that motherhood would be a time of peace, a time when she could bond with her child and focus on raising him to become a great ruler. Instead, the constant crying made her feel helpless. The royal advisors were watching, their faces filled with concern. "Your Highness, we've tried everything. Maybe we should call for more experts." One of them suggested. "No," Liara said firmly. "There is no need for more experts. There must be something I can do." But deep inside, she wasn't so sure anymore. The weight of the responsibility on her shoulders was growing heavier with each passing day, as the baby's cries grew louder. A part of her feared that she was failing as a mother, even though she had done everything right. Just then, one of the palace guards entered the room, a human soldier. His name was John. He had been assigned to protect the princess and her family as part of the alliance between their world and Earth. He wasn't like the alien advisors or, quote, the healers. He was just a regular human soldier, strong and reliable. But somewhat out of place in the high-tech world of the alien kingdom, John had always kept to himself. Understanding that humans were considered somewhat primitive by the standards of the aliens, still he carried out his duties with pride, and his respect for Liara and her people had earned him a quiet place in the palace. "Your Highness," John said, his voice calm as he stood at the doorway. "I heard the baby crying. Is everything all right?" Liara looked at him, surprised to see him standing there. She had never expected a human to enter the royal chambers, let alone offer help with something as personal as this. "Everything is not all right," she replied, her voice filled with worry. "My son will not stop crying. Nothing we've tried has worked." John stood silently for a moment, taking in the situation. He could feel the tension in the room. The princess was clearly exhausted, and the royal advisors were beginning to look worried as well. "Maybe I could try something," John said, stepping closer. Wasn't sure what he was offering, but he could tell that something had to change. Liara raised an eyebrow. "You? How could a human help with this? We have experts for these things." John shrugged. "I don't know, but back on Earth, we didn't have all these fancy machines. Sometimes all it takes is something simple." Liara was skeptical, but curious. Knew there was no harm in allowing him to try. The baby's cries were wearing her thin. She was willing to try anything at this point. "Very well," she said, stepping back from the crib. John moved closer to the baby. It was still crying loudly. He took a deep breath, and in a gentle voice began speaking to the child. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, his voice steady and soothing. "It's okay. You're safe now." Liara watched in surprise. There was something about his voice, something calm and comforting, that made her feel a little more at ease. She had never heard anyone speak to the baby like that before. The baby's cries slowed for a moment, as though listening. John then began humming a soft tune, one that he remembered from his childhood on Earth. It was a simple lullaby, a song his mother used to sing to him when he couldn't sleep. As he hummed, the baby's cries grew quieter. The princess couldn't believe her eyes. The room, which had been filled with tension and worry, suddenly felt calmer. Within moments, the baby stopped crying altogether. He blinked up at John with wide, curious eyes, as if he were trying to understand who this human was. John smiled gently and reached down to gently stroke the baby's soft hair. Liara's heart skipped a beat. For the first time in days, her son was quiet. Her anxiety began to ease, and she felt a wave of relief wash over her. She looked at John, who was still humming softly, and then met the eyes of her advisors. I don't understand, Liara whispered, her voice filled with wonder. How did you do that? John gave a small, humble smile. Sometimes all it takes is a little bit of human warmth. The room was silent for a moment, as everyone took in what had just happened. The princess couldn't help but feel a strange sense of gratitude toward the human soldier. Despite being so different, he had done what none of the alien experts could. John stood up, gently placing the baby back in the crib. The princess was still staring at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and awe. Thank you, she said, her voice sincere. You've done what no one else could. I'm grateful. John simply nodded, his expression neutral but warm. It was nothing, Your Highness. I'm just glad I could help. As John turned to leave, Liara couldn't help but feel a strange sense of connection to him. She had never expected a human to play such an important role in her life, but in that moment she realized that maybe the alliance between their worlds could offer more than just political benefits. Perhaps there was something even more profound about this connection between them. As the baby rested peacefully in his crib, Liara stood quietly, lost in thought. Little did she know, this simple act of kindness would change the course of her life and her relationship with this human. The days following the baby's sudden calmness were strange for Princess Liara. She couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The baby had cried for so long that she had nearly lost hope. But John, the human soldier, had somehow managed to calm him with nothing more than his voice. Liara watched him closely now, as he went about his duties in the palace. He didn't seem to think much of the event, but Liara couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than she had first believed. He had come from a distant world, a place so different from her own. Humans were known for their bravery and strength, but Liara had always thought of them as primitive, simple in their ways. She never expected that a human could be the one to solve a problem so deeply personal to her. As the days passed, John began to be called upon more frequently. Whenever the baby started to cry, the palace staff would ask him to come and calm the child. At first, it was just out of curiosity, but soon it became clear that John was the only one who could bring peace to the baby. One afternoon, as Liara sat in the royal garden, holding her son, she noticed John walking by. He was talking with a few of the palace guards, but when he saw her, he gave a small wave and made his way over to her. Your Highness, he said respectfully, bowing his head slightly. Is the baby today? Liara smiled, a soft and relieved smile. Much better, thanks to you, she said, looking down at her son, who was peacefully asleep in her arms. She hadn't expected to feel so grateful toward him, but she did. I don't know what you did, but it worked. John shrugged, a humble smile on his face. I just did what I could. It's nothing, really. But it's everything to me, Liara replied, looking up at him.
Ow.
There was a warmth in her gaze that surprised even her. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone to help her, someone she could trust. She had always been taught to rely on her people, on her advisors, on her royal heritage. And yet a human had been the one to come through for her. John's smile grew slightly. I'm happy I could help, he said. There was a sincerity in his voice, and it made Liara feel like she had someone on her side. The two of them stood in the garden for a while, talking about the baby and about Earth, where John had come from. Liara found herself intrigued by his stories. Earth sounded like such a different place. The things John described, cities full of tall buildings, the wide oceans, the endless skies, seemed so foreign to her. But somehow, it also felt close, like a part of her was beginning to understand this human world. As they spoke, the baby stirred slightly in Liara's arms, waking up. Liara gently rocked him and he quieted again. It was clear that John's presence had a calming effect on the child. Over time, the baby's crying became less frequent, but whenever it did happen, John was always there to help. He had a special way with the child that no one else seemed to have. His gentle voice and calm demeanor worked wonders, and each time, the baby would fall back to sleep in no time. Liara was beginning to look forward to these moments with John. She wasn't sure what it was exactly, but there was something comforting about having him around. He wasn't like the others. He didn't act as if he knew everything. Instead, he simply listened, observed, and did what he could. That made all the difference. One evening after another long day of attending to royal matters, Liara found herself in the nursery again, sitting with the baby. John was there, as always, helping with the evening routine. "Thank you for everything," Liara said quietly, her voice softer than usual. She had never been one to express her emotions so openly, but for some reason she felt compelled to. "I don't know what I would have done without you." John looked at her, his expression gentle but serious. "You're welcome, Your Highness. It's my duty to help, no matter what." Liara nodded, but something in her heart told her that it was more than just duty. John had done more than help her. He had given her something she hadn't even known. She needed. He had brought peace to a situation that had seemed hopeless. And now, every time she saw him, she felt a growing sense of gratitude, and something else, something she couldn't quite put into words. As the days passed, Liara found herself thinking about John more and more. She began to seek out his company. Even when the baby wasn't crying, they would sit together, talking about their worlds, sharing small moments of connection. Liara had always felt alone in her role as a princess. There were always advisors, royal duties, and endless expectations. But with John, she didn't feel like a ruler. She just felt like a woman, a mother. John, too, seemed to be growing more comfortable in her presence. The awkwardness that had once been between them was slowly fading. He wasn't just the human soldier anymore. He was someone she could trust, someone who understood even without words. One evening, as the sun set behind the palace walls, casting long shadows across the garden, Liara found herself watching John as he worked. He was talking with one of the other soldiers, but his gaze often flickered back toward her. She couldn't help but notice how strong and capable he was. There was a quiet confidence in him that she admired. For the first time in a long while, Liara felt something stir in her heart, something unexpected. She had always been focused on her duties as a princess. But now, for the first time, she was beginning to see the man standing in front of her, not just as a soldier, but as someone important, and as the stars began to appear in the evening sky, Liara couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. How would this unexpected connection between them change the future of her kingdom? And what role would this human soldier play? The days went by, and Liara began to notice a change. It wasn't just the baby that seemed calmer. There was something different about her as well. She felt lighter, more at ease. Ever since John had stepped into her life, things had begun to shift in ways she hadn't expected. His presence had brought a sense of peace to her home, one that she hadn't known she needed. It was as if the storm inside her had finally quieted. John had become a regular part of her daily routine. Whenever the baby cried, he was there. But it wasn't just the baby he helped with. Liara found herself relying on him for more than just small tasks. She started to enjoy their talks, whether they were about their worlds, their dreams, or even simple things like their favorite foods. She had never thought she would connect with someone like John, especially a human. Her life had always been about duty, about the expectations placed on her as a princess. But with John, she didn't feel like she had to be anyone other than herself. He saw her as just Liara, not as the princess or the ruler. And somehow, that made everything feel simpler. One afternoon, as the sun set, painting the sky with warm orange and pink hues, Liara sat in the royal gardens with her son, watching him play with a small toy. John sat nearby, quietly cleaning his weapon as usual. He had been part of her royal guard for some time now. And although he wasn't used to the high-class life, he had come to find comfort in the simple moments like these. "Do you ever miss Earth?" Liara asked, breaking the silence. John paused for a moment, looking up at her. He hadn't expected such a question. "Sometimes," he said, "Earth is ... home after all. But I've learned a lot here. Your world isn't so different from mine in some ways." Liara smiled slightly, intrigued by his answer. "In what ways?" John thought for a moment, then replied, "People are the same everywhere. They want to feel safe, to care for the ones they love. The same things matter to all of us, even if our worlds are different." Liara nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She had spent so much of her life feeling like an outsider in her own palace, surrounded by people who spoke in riddles of politics and strategy. But here in the quiet garden with John, she didn't feel like a ruler or a princess. She felt like a person, someone who could just be. The baby giggled from the grass, his laughter filling the air like music. Liara watched him, her heart swelling with love. She hadn't realized how much she had been missing these moments until they were finally here. "Thank you," Liara said softly, her voice full of gratitude. She turned to John, her eyes sincere. "For everything, for being here, for helping me." John looked up from his weapon and met her gaze. "It's my job, Your Highness. I'm happy to help in any way I can." Liara smiled. But there was more. Behind her words, she knew it was more than just duty for him. It had never felt like that. With every day that passed, she felt a connection growing between them, something she couldn't explain, but couldn't ignore either. As the weeks passed, that connection only deepened. Liara found herself seeking out John's company even when the baby wasn't crying. She began to look forward to their quiet conversations, the moments when she could be herself without the weight of her crown. She learned more about Earth through John's stories. She learned that despite all the differences between their worlds, they shared many of the same hopes and fears. One day, after the baby had fallen asleep in her arms, Liara found herself talking to John as they sat together in the garden. The air was cool and the stars were starting to appear in the sky above them. "Tell me more about Earth," she said, her voice soft. "What's it like to grow up there?" John chuckled, a warm sound that made Liara smile. "It's a lot. Like this, I guess. We have cities, forests, oceans. We have schools, jobs, and families. We worry about the same things you do, whether we're doing the right thing, whether we're making a difference. But it's all a little simpler in a way. I guess that's why I became a soldier. I wanted to do something that mattered, something that could help." Liara listened intently, feeling the sincerity in his words. She was struck by the simplicity of it all, the idea that people everywhere, no matter their world, had the same hopes and dreams. That realization made her feel closer to him than ever. "That's admirable," she said quietly. "I've spent my whole life thinking that everything I do has to be perfect, that I have to make all the right decisions. But sometimes I wonder if I've lost touch with what's really important." John turned to face her, his eyes kind. "You're not alone in that," he said. "We all feel that way sometimes. But you're doing your best. You care about your people, about your son. That's what matters most." Liara felt a lump in her throat as she looked at him. His words hit deeper than she expected. She had spent so much time feeling like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, that she hadn't stopped to see the people around her who truly cared for her. "I'm not sure what I would do without you," Liara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. John smiled, his expression gentle. "You'd do just fine, Your Highness. You're stronger than you think." As Liara looked at him, she realized just how much she had come to rely on him, not just for the baby's sake, but for her own peace of mind. John wasn't just a soldier to her anymore. He was a friend, a person who understood her in ways no one else did. The quiet between them stretched on, comfortable and easy. The baby stirred in Liara's arms, and she gently rocked him back to sleep, a soft smile on her face. For the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. There was a bond between them now, something unspoken but real. Liara didn't know where this would lead, but she felt certain that this connection with John was only the beginning of something important. Something that Liara could feel the tension building in the palace. It wasn't just the usual pressure of royal life, it was something more. A sense of unease had begun to spread among the people, and it was impossible to ignore. She had always been aware of the power struggles that existed behind the scenes, but now it felt different. A storm was brewing, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it was heading straight for her. John had noticed it too. There were whispers among the palace guards, hushed conversations behind closed doors. Liara's growing reliance on him. A human soldier seemed to be causing ripples within the royal court. At first, the advisors had merely found it odd, but now it seemed like something far more dangerous was taking shape. One evening, Liara sat alone in her chambers, her thoughts heavy. A knock at the door broke her from her reverie. It was John, as usual, arriving to check on her. But tonight, his expression was different, serious, almost guarded. "Your Highness," John said quietly, stepping inside. "I need to speak with you." Liara rose to her feet, sensing the change in his tone. "What's going on, John? You seem troubled." John hesitated for a moment, glancing around the room, as if checking to make sure they were alone. "I've heard rumors," he said softly. "People are starting to talk. They're not happy with the way you've been relying on me." Liara frowned. "What do you mean?" John's face was hard to read, but there was concern in his eyes. "There are those in the court who see your trust in a human soldier as a weakness. They're starting to think that you've lost control. There's talk of them wanting to remove you from the throne." Liara's heart skipped a beat. She had known there were factions in the court that didn't approve of her relationship with John, but she hadn't realized how far it had gone. The thought of being overthrown, of losing everything she had worked so hard for, filled her with a cold dread. "Who are these people?" Liara asked, her voice trembling with anger and fear. "Who dares to challenge my rule?" John's expression softened. "It's not that simple. These aren't people you'd expect. Some of your closest advisors are involved. They see your connection with me as a sign that you're weak, that you're no longer fit to lead, and they're using it to their advantage." Liara's mind raced. She had always known that power was fragile, but she hadn't expected it to be threatened so soon. Her reliance on John had been born out of necessity, but now it seemed like it had become the very thing that could bring her down. She had trusted the wrong people, and now they were turning against her. "What do we do?" Liara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't bear the thought of losing her kingdom, but she knew she couldn't do it alone. Not anymore. John stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "Gosh, we need to be careful. There's already talk of a coup. They want to take control of the throne. If you don't act soon, it might be too late." Liara's mind spun. She had never been a fighter, never been one to take matters into her own hands. But now, it seemed like that was exactly what she had to do. She couldn't afford to sit idly by while her enemies plotted against her. "Who can we trust?" she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. "I don't know who to turn to." John gave a small, reassuring smile. "I'll be here. I won't let them take you down. But we'll need to act fast. You've got allies, people who still believe in you. We just have to find them before it's too late." Liara nodded, determination beginning to rise within her. She wasn't going to let anyone take her throne. She had worked too hard to get to this point, but she wasn't going to let anyone tear it all away. Over the next few days, John and Liara worked together in secret. They carefully selected those who could be trusted loyal guards, few key advisors, and others who had proven their faith in the princess. The plan was simple: root out the conspirators, expose them, and take back control. But the danger was real, and every move had to be carefully calculated. John's presence was a comfort to Liara, despite the gravity of the situation. She found herself relying on him more than ever. His calmness, his level-headed approach, gave her strength when she felt like she might crack under the pressure. It was clear to her now that she wasn't just relying on him to calm the baby or protect her. It was much deeper than that. Trusted him with everything. The palace was on edge. Whispers filled the halls, and the royal court was divided. Some supported Liara, while others saw her reliance on a human soldier as a sign of her weakness. Every passing day brought new challenges, new obstacles to overcome, but Liara was not ready to give up. Not when she had so much to protect. The thought of her baby, her son, losing his future, losing his throne, was unbearable. She had to fight, and she had to win. Late one evening, as Liara sat in her private chambers, planning the next steps with John, the door creaked open. A figure stepped inside one of her trusted advisors. Liara's heart raced as she saw the worried look on his face. "They're moving, Your Highness," the advisor whispered urgently. "They've gathered their forces. The coup is happening. Sooner than we thought." Liara stood up, her mind already calculating the next move. "It's time," she said, her voice steady. "We move tonight. Gather the loyal ones. We take back what's ours. John placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes meeting hers. I'm with you, Liara. We'll do this together. Liara nodded, her heart filled with a mix of fear and determination. The battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but she knew she had the strength to fight. With John by her side, she would face. The night was thick with tension as Liara and John prepared for what was to come. The palace was quiet, but beneath that silence, the air hummed with uncertainty. The coup was no longer a distant threat, it was happening now, Liara's kingdom. Her throne and her very future were at stake. John had gathered the few loyal guards they could trust. Those who had sworn to protect Liara and her son no matter the cost. Together, they formed a small but determined group, ready to face the conspirators who sought to tear everything apart. As Liara stood by her window, looking out over the palace grounds, her thoughts raced. She had always known that power was fragile, but never had it seemed so delicate, so easily swept away by the actions of a few. It was hard to imagine that people she had trusted could turn against her. Yet that was the reality she now faced. The palace was no longer a safe place for her or her son, but she was not afraid to fight. The thought of losing her child, of allowing these conspirators to take everything from her, filled her with a deep sense of determination. She had come too far to back down now. John approached her, his presence steady and calm. Your Highness, we're ready, he said quietly, his voice firm. We've gathered the men we trust. It's time to make our move. Liara nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. Let's do it. They moved quickly, gathering their forces and preparing for the confrontation that was sure to come. The palace was divided. Some supported Liara, while others sided with the conspirators. The battle that would follow would determine who would rule the kingdom. As they made their way through the dark halls of the palace, Liara couldn't help but feel a sense of weight on her shoulders. This wasn't just about her. This was about her people, her family, and the future of her son. She had to win, not just for herself, but for all of them. John was by her side the entire time, guiding her through the maze-like palace and making sure they stayed one step ahead of the enemy. His calm demeanor gave her strength, and with every step, she felt a little less like a princess and a little more like a warrior. She wasn't alone. With John and her loyal guards beside her, she felt ready to face whatever came next. They reached the royal chamber, where the conspirators were waiting. The room was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the walls. The traitors were gathered around a large table, speaking in hushed tones. They didn't expect Liara to arrive so soon. They thought they had more time to prepare, but they were wrong. Liara stepped into the room, her presence commanding attention. Enough, she said, her voice clear and steady. The conspirators looked up, surprised to see her standing before them. You dare challenge me? She asked, her gaze hardening. You think you can take my throne with your lies and deceit? One of the leaders of the coup, a man named Yalin, sneered at her. You've lost your power, Liara, he said coldly. You've made a fool of yourself by relying on a human soldier to do your bidding. You've lost the respect of your people. It's time for you to step aside. Liara's heart pounded, but she stood tall. I will not step aside. I will not let you destroy everything I've worked for, everything my son deserves. Stepped forward, his hand on the hilt of his weapon. You'll have to go through me first, he said, his voice low and filled with quiet strength. The conspirators laughed, underestimating the human soldier. But Liara could see the fear in their eyes. They knew that they had underestimated her, that they had underestimated the power of loyalty and determination. With a single nod from Liara, the battle began. Her loyal guards, along with John, fought with everything they had. The palace echoed, with the sounds of clashing weapons, the rush of bodies moving through the shadows. Liara's heart raced, but she remained calm. This was her fight. This was her moment. She moved quickly, dodging the strikes of the traitors and using her knowledge of the palace to her advantage. She had spent her whole life in these halls. She knew every corner, every hidden passage. The conspirators, on the other hand, were new to this place. Their unfamiliarity worked against them as the battle raged on. John fought by her side, his movements swift and precise. The strength he had shown in helping her with the baby, the calmness he brought to the chaos, was now evident in the way he fought. He was a warrior, not just a soldier, and Liara felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for him. She had never imagined that a human could be her ally in such a way, but now it felt as though there was no one else she would rather have at her side. The fight seemed to go on forever, but Liara never lost focus. She couldn't afford to. Every time she saw one of her guards fall, she pushed herself harder. She fought for them, for her people, for the future of her son. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the conspirators were defeated. The traitors who had sought to overthrow her lay on the ground, their plans shattered. Liara stood tall, her chest heaving with exhaustion, but she didn't care. She had won. She had protected everything she loved. John came to her side, his expression proud but tired. "It's over," he said quietly. Liara nodded, looking around the room at the fallen enemies. "It's over," she whispered. The palace was still. The battle had ended, but the fight for her throne had only just begun. With John by her side, she knew that she would rebuild her kingdom. She would bring peace to her people once again. But for now, she allowed herself to take a breath. The battle was won. The battle for the throne was over, but the real work was only just beginning. Liara stood in the quiet of the royal palace, the weight of everything that had happened still heavy on her shoulders. She had fought for her kingdom, for her son, and for the future she had always dreamed of. But now, as she looked around, she realized that the battle had changed her in ways she hadn't expected. The palace, once a symbol of power, now felt like a place of both victory and loss. Many of the conspirators had been dealt with, but their betrayal still echoed in the halls. The trust that had been broken could never be fully repaired. And yet, Liara knew that she could not dwell on the past. She had to look forward to rebuild. To strengthen her rule in a way that would ensure her people's safety and prosperity, John had been her steadfast ally throughout the chaos. She had relied on him more than anyone could have imagined. His calm presence, his unshakable loyalty, had been the anchor she needed during the storm. He had fought alongside her, not as a soldier protecting a princess, but as a partner in a shared mission. Now, as the dust settled and the palace returned to its quiet, the two of them stood together, ready to face what came next. Liara couldn't help but glance at John as they stood by the palace balcony looking out over the city below. The sun was just beginning to set, casting the sky in hues of pink and gold. The air was cool, and the stars would soon begin to shine above them. "You." "No," Liara said, breaking the silence. "I never thought it would come to this." John turned to look at her, his expression gentle but serious. "None of us did. But you fought, Liara. You fought for everything that matters." She sighed, her thoughts heavy. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I thought I could rule, without having to go through so much conflict. But now, I see that nothing in life comes easy, and that's something I have to accept." John nodded, understanding her struggle. "It's not easy, but you're stronger than you realize. You've proven that today." Liara met his gaze, feeling a sense of gratitude she hadn't fully understood before. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, her voice sincere. "You're the one who helped me stay grounded when everything else was falling apart. You gave me the courage to stand up and fight." John smiled softly. "I'm just a soldier, Your Highness, but I'm glad I could help." Liara took a deep breath, her mind spinning with all the changes that had come so quickly. The coup had left her shaken, but it had also shown her something important: that she could rely on the people she trusted, and that those bonds were stronger than any betrayal. "There's still so much to do," Liara said, her voice filled with determination. "I have to rebuild the trust of my people, strengthen the palace, and ensure that no one ever tries to take what is ours again." John placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance. "You'll do it. I'll be here to help you." "Every step of the way?" Liara nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She wasn't alone. She never had to be alone again. John had become more than just a protector. He had become a friend, a companion, and someone she could count on. When the world seemed too big and too overwhelming, as the days passed, Liara began the long process of healing and rebuilding. She addressed her people, assuring them that the threat had been dealt with and that peace would return to the kingdom. It was a difficult task, but she faced it with the same strength she had shown in battle. She knew that the trust she had lost would take time to restore, but she was determined to make it happen. John remained by her side, always ready to lend a hand, offer advice, or simply stand with her when she needed it most. Their bond had grown stronger with each passing day, and Liara found herself beginning to rely on him in ways she hadn't expected. He wasn't just the soldier who had calmed her baby or fought beside her in the battle. He was someone who had changed her life in ways she never imagined. One evening, as the two of them walked through the royal gardens, Liara turned to John. "You know," she said, her voice thoughtful, "when I first met you, I never imagined we'd be standing here like this. You've become more than just an ally. You've become ... important to me." John stopped walking, looking at her with a mixture of surprise and warmth. "Liara?" She raised a hand, stopping him. "I'm not asking for anything more than what we already have. But I want you to know that I'm grateful for everything. You've shown me what it means to trust someone, to lean on them when I need help. I never knew I could do that." John looked at her for a long moment, his gaze soft and sincere. "You don't have to thank me, Your Highness. I'm honored to be here by your side." Liara smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. She had always carried the burden of royalty alone, but now she didn't have to. She had Janand. He had become an essential part of her life as they continued their walk through the gardens. The night settling in around them, Liara realized that the future no longer seemed so uncertain. Yes, there would be challenges ahead, there always were. Now she felt ready to face them. With John's support and the strength of her people behind her, she knew that she could overcome anything. Together, they would rebuild the kingdom. Together, they would protect the future of her son. And together, they would prove that no matter how dark the night, there was always a way forward, a new beginning, waiting just